It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
The gloves were off as Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton met for their second debate to see who will be the next U.S. president. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu. This is The Heat. It's been a rough few weeks for Donald Trump, widely seen as having lost the first debate. Last Friday saw the release of a decade-old tape in which he used crude language about women. With some prominent supporters now abandoning him, the Republican candidate headed into yesterday's debate with a lot to prove. CCTV's Jim Spellman picks up the story.
It began without a handshake and continued with a series of heated exchanges.
Oh yeah.
It was.
What about the other 15,000?
Please allow her to respond. She didn't talk while you talked.
The second debate between Democrat Hillary Clinton and Republican Donald Trump came just days after the release of a 2005 tape of Trump making lewd comments about women.
I moved on her, actually. You know, she was down in Palm Beach. I moved on her, and I failed. I'll admit it. Whoa. I did try and her. She was married.
Trump began with an apology.
This was locker room talk. I'm not proud of it. I apologize to my family. I apologize to the American people.
But Clinton said the remarks show he is not fit to be president.
And he has said that the video doesn't represent who he is. But I think it's clear to anyone who heard it that it represents exactly who he is.
The two clashed over Syria, with Trump contradicting his running mate, who last week called for U.S. military intervention against Syrian government forces.
Your 2 minutes
I don't
is up.
like Assad at all, but Assad is killing ISIS. Russia is killing ISIS, and Iran is killing ISIS. And those three have now lined up because of our weak foreign policy.
Clinton says no to U.S. ground forces in Syria, but supports arming Kurdish rebels. A Muslim American asked candidates about Islamophobia in the U.S. Trump repeated his calls for the U.S. to severely limit immigration from Muslim countries. Clinton says that's a mistake.
We are not at war with Islam, and it is a mistake, and it plays into the hands of the terrorists to act as though we are. So I want a country where citizens like you and your family are just as welcome as anyone else.
Clinton's use of a private email server while Secretary of State has dogged her through the campaign. Trump says if he becomes president, he will appoint a special prosecutor to investigate.
You know, it's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
How's the debate playing out abroad? In Mexico, some doubt it will change many minds.
It's very clear. I don't think either of them pulled any independents or undecided voters their way.
In Hong Kong, there are questions about Trump's character.
He is the man he is, and everything he says, everything he does, whether locker room or in the public or in TV or closed doors, everything a person says and does defines that person.
Trump entered the debate with plummeting poll numbers and some key Republicans pulling support. His performance seems to have at least stopped the bleeding, but the question now is whether key Republicans will remain by his side. With only about 4 weeks before the debate, Trump has a lot of ground to make up to catch Hillary Clinton. Anand?
Thanks, Jim. That's CCTV's Jim Spellman reporting. Okay, let's get to our panel right now. With us here in Washington is Leonard Steinhorn, a political strategist. He teaches public communication at American University. Atiba Madyoun is president of the Madyoun Group, a government relations firm. Hamoud Salih serves as Associate Dean and a Professor of Political Science at California State University, Dominguez Hills. He joins us from Los Angeles. And Afshin Malavi is a Senior Fellow at the Johns Hopkins University Foreign Policy Institute and serves as the co-director of Emerge 85 Lab, a new platform for voices from Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Afshin, during that debate, we heard a few rough exchanges there, some bitter exchanges between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. But looking at the debate more broadly, Did it go fine telling us, telling the voting public whom they should vote for?
No, I don't think it did. I mean, in fact, I think ever since American presidential debates, we entered the television era, starting in 1960, I think, every 4 years, debates have been getting dumber and dumber. And, in a sense, what we saw was the reality show debate, on screen. But, and I say this, not with a bit of a smirk. I say this with a sense of tragedy. One of the things that Hillary Clinton was saying about Donald Trump, and one of the things that Donald Trump was saying about Hillary Clinton, was that each candidate is unfit to serve, right? I think that debate that we saw was unfit for this great country of the United States of America. The campaign we're witnessing is unfit for this great country of the United States of America. And I think that, I fear that we have entered uncharted territory here in the nastiness of the politics here. So I think that's my biggest takeaway from the debate.
Leonard, I guess the point is it may have descended into the realm of reality television, but was there any kind of turning point in this debate? Because whatever happens next, we're going to have a new president.
Well, I think this debate might not matter all that much, given all of the issues surrounding the Donald Trump candidacy and what happened with the hot mic tape that was released beforehand. That was a big cloud over this debate. But where I beg to differ with you a little bit is that I wouldn't put moral equivalency on both of those candidates. Donald Trump really has been the one who has brought this aspect of democracy down. He doesn't develop arguments with any coherence. He shows an incredible lack of substantive knowledge and understanding of the issues. He goes on the attack. His nonverbal communication, interpersonal communication can be very, very harsh. So I'm not so sure that I would say that the debate or the democracy is sour. I just say, in this particular case, Donald Trump is demeaning it and dumbing it down. And I don't necessarily think Hillary Clinton should be sort of washed over with the same accusation, because when you look at what she did yesterday, she did try to answer those questions. And when she did answer those questions, she did it with a degree of substance and knowledge that is exactly what we want out of our presidential candidates.
No, fair point. Just a quick retort on that. I would also add I think just in general, the way the television media in particular covers these candidates. It's become simply gotcha journalism. I think actually television debates ought to be more boring. They ought to be longer. They ought to be they should not be made for TV spectacles. And we spend 3 or 4 hours with each candidate, and we really get the sense of their vision.
Okay, let's go to Hamoud in Los Angeles. Yeah. Hamoud, these television debates, in fact, a lot of the discussion, a lot of the campaign talk about domestic issues when there's an election. Very rarely do we hear very much about foreign policy issues. We did hear a bit about Syria during this debate. Let's watch a bit of that.
Iran now and Russia are now against us. So she wants to fight. She wants to fight for rebels. There's only one problem. You don't even know who the rebels are.
Mr. Trump,
so
Mr.
what's
Trump,
the purpose?
your 2 minutes
and one thing
is
I
up.
have to say,
your 2 minutes
I don't
is
like
up.
Assad at all, but Assad is killing ISIS. Russia is killing ISIS, and Iran is killing ISIS. And those three have now lined up because of our weak foreign policy.
I would not use American ground forces in Syria. I think that would be a very serious mistake. I don't think American troops should be holding territory, which is what they would have to do as an occupying force. I do think the use of special forces, which we're using, the use of enablers and trainers in Iraq, which has had some positive effects, are very much in our interests.
Shah Hamoud, was that exchange enlightening? Did we learn any more about what these candidates will do?
Not at all. I think it's a big tragedy at a time when we are witnessing major problems in Syria, a humanitarian case beyond imagination, and the candidate can only talk to them the way they did. Certainly, there are some differences between the two approaches. Hillary Clinton seems to be more, sort of to a large degree, poised a realist, someone who would study, who is thoughtful about it, wants a no-fly zone, for example, but wants also to want to send some troops there. Donald Trump is more about personal issue, personalities, and that kind of worrisome. This simplicity is really sort of beyond explanation. At a time when we're looking for a way out of this crisis or a strategic solution to this problem, after all, the current president has spent every day of his presidency dealing with conflicts. With all of that, we came to that kind of statement is really appalling.
Right, Natiba, just listening to what Hamoud said there, was this a missed opportunity? There are very important issues in this country. I was looking at some of them: job creation, wealth inequality, mass incarceration, the surveillance system that's come into place. We hear nothing about this.
Last night we started off saying that the gloves were off. It felt like the gloves were on last night. They started off going at each other and not answering the questions that the audience had. So we never got to get into those issues, the real issues. When you look at this whole race, I was just thinking, when you look at whether or not it was Reagan against Carter, who was the most exciting candidate? Reagan. When you look at Bush, when he ran for president against Dukakis, same thing. And all the way down the line, till now, Hillary is the most boring candidate that we have in this particular race. The person that seems to be the page turner continues to be Trump. But Trump does not talk about the issues because he doesn't know how to talk about the issues. He's not, we talk about, well, he's an outsider. And there are a lot of people that feel that they can trust him. But do we want an outsider who doesn't understand policy? Do we want an outsider who's going to make decisions that are going to separate us as it relates to our relationships around the world? That's the type of candidate that we have right here with Trump. And so we never get into the real issues.
All right.
But let's also look at that one particular clip in which Donald Trump was talking about Assad and Russia. They are not fighting ISIS. They are fighting the rebels in Syria and propping up the Assad government. So on a basic fundamental fact, because Donald Trump said it, doesn't make it true. And in fact, where is the fact checking on all of this? So I think, the fact that people go out and say things that aren't true in these debates, and this is what worries me more than anything, is that people are actually sort of living in this post-fact world where they're saying things that absolutely aren't true, but if they have good facial expressions or they say it with a calm voice, people pass over it. That wasn't true. He should have been called on it. And that does give us the information you're talking about. Do we want somebody in the White House who doesn't have the substantive knowledge of the issues in the world?
I mean, one other thing that we're not talking about is that when the president says something, the president sets policy. Mm-hmm. So if this is what he's saying and this is what he's going to say as president, he's setting the precedent right there with his language. He's showing us how he's going to be as president. Unfortunately, right now, and this has been throughout, as a Republican, I'll say this, Republicans have always done a good job with the sound bites. That's what he's done. He may not be telling us anything substantive, but he's sticking to the talking points.
It seems as if we're living in this kind of bubble here in the United States when we listen to these debates. Afshin, you were at the meetings of the IMF and the World Bank taking place in Washington right now. These are very important meetings, very influential people there. Did you hear anything at those meetings about the election? Any concerns at all?
Yes, absolutely, Anand. In fact, it was quite striking. We're living in a global economy that is becoming very sluggish. World trade is slowing down. Another European banking crisis is looming over the horizon. But there was enormous amount of talk about Donald Trump and the fear of a Donald Trump presidency, because Donald Trump represents in many ways, and he's not alone, but this populist, nationalist nativism that we're seeing play out in advanced economies, not just in the United States, but in Europe as well. This skepticism towards free trade, this deglobalization attitude. Now, we all understand that there's aspects of free trade that haven't worked out, but I think the Donald Trump is taking it to another level. And what was fascinating, Anand, is that you would see finance ministers from South Africa, India, China, from the emerging markets, saying essentially what we used to say about the emerging markets, saying, interesting, a lot of potential, the politics are too risky in this place, and if you look at the Pew Global Attitudes Project, they did this fascinating poll where they asked Americans, do you feel your children will be better off? 2/3 of them said no. That same poll in India, China, and the emerging markets, more than 50%, up to 2/3 said yes. So we're seeing a hope gap shifting, and the fear in the World Bank IMF meetings was that a Donald Trump presidency could, potentially collapse the global economy.
Leonard, that's something that, we hear Donald Trump say these things. Is he saying these things because he believes them, because he believes that's a policy he wants to follow, or is he responding to this wave of anger that people have, say, inside the Republican Party?
Well, you have to imagine that he believes what he's saying, and in fact, what he's saying now isn't anything new. You go dial back 25 years, and he was saying similar things throughout the 1980s and 1990s. He was also the one who was leading the birther charge on President Obama. So the nativism, the nationalism, the demagoguery, that's been there all along with him. I think the bigger question is not the fact that Donald Trump says these things or whether he believes them, it's that he's tapping into this vein of resentment and anger and bitterness among a certain swath of the American people, and I think that's something that we have to deal with. This is the challenge for the Republican Party right now. Can they put that genie of anger and resentment back in the bottle and find a way to manage it and channel it into constructive ways? Or will it become a party sort of that's defined by the sort of nativism and nationalism in the years ahead? I think this is the real challenge for the Republicans.
And Atibia, that group of people, that certain swathe of people that Leonard talks about, they're not going anywhere after the election.
Yeah, right now, the group that I'm most concerned about is millennials. And oftentimes we're not having a conversation about millennials that just went through this economic recession. So in terms of what we have, it's almost like there's a sickness or illness that came out from that. So this desire to try to break this thing apart, that's part of what we're talking about when we talk about this swath of electorates who want to vote and are basically, no matter what you say to them, no matter what you say that Trump is the enemy, they have already made up their mind. They've already dug into the sand. It's almost like two sports teams playing each other and no one's keeping score. Everyone just picks the team that they want to win, and that's who's going to win. And so with Trump right now, you see someone who he's divisive, but he has hit the nail on the head in regard to this group that feels that this our political structure, the way that it is, has already messed things up so much. How much worse can it get with Trump?
Right, let's go to Hamoud. Hamoud, what did you make of the candidates' broad positions on the Middle East, on the issues that face the United States over there? Things like the Iran nuclear deal, for one. We talked about Syria. Then, of course, there is the dispute between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
Well, all of those issues have been missing. I mean, the discussion stays in general terms. I think in practical terms, Hillary Clinton's position on Syria could be troubling. For one obvious reason is that the no-fly zone is a big issue. Her side with the Kurdish and supporting the Kurdish group can be problematic, for it is a sensitive issue when it comes to the Turkey and other regional allies. On the Israeli-Palestinian issue, that is an issue that seems to be both sides are on the same, in that they both want the negotiations somehow continuing, and they both blame terrorism for the failure of the resumption of the negotiations, and they both target, claim that they want a better, stronger relationship with the Israelis and promote Israeli interest. But I think it's a deeper issue is that discussing the issue of foreign policy is also a reflection of how our universities, our schools, our media address foreign policy issues. We really don't give that much importance to this issue outside a group of few people who are expert. And it seems when we talk in simplicity, where leaders talk in simplicity, they reach a certain audience. And more than anything else, it's easy to spread a lie, and when you continue spreading it, there is that 1% doctrine that some talk about, that somehow it will create some kind of confusion or a mix of reality. So when it comes to the Middle East, it seems like, there has yet to be a very, very serious debate, a serious discussion about the issues that has happened in the region. We sort of have not escaped, except the theatrics that we've seen, except the change of wording that they both the candidates use, and particularly Trump. It's been always like this. The foreign policy takes a few minutes of the 90 minutes debate. So it's not surprising that we have not heard that much of it at this point.
All right, Afshin, looking at the foreign policies of these two candidates, Donald Trump's foreign policy, well, we got to say we don't know, because he hasn't outlined what his policy would be, say, with a view to Iran or the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or what is going on in Syria right now. In fact, he called the Iran deal the dumbest deal ever in the history of deal-making. When it comes to Hillary Clinton, are we going to see largely a continuation of the policies that Barack Obama has followed?
I think, you know, we'll largely see some level of continuation, but I think Hillary Clinton comes from a different generation in American foreign policy thinking, and her generation was more affected by the Bosnia War. She's more of a Cold War foreign policy thinker, and I think she would be more willing to implement the use of American power than President Barack Obama has been. Particularly this issue of the no-fly zone. This hasn't gotten as much attention as it should have gotten. That is military action. Implementing a no-fly zone over Syria is a significant escalation, one that President Obama has been refusing to do. So I think what we'll probably see with President Hillary Clinton is a continuation. The thing that I am curious about is how much has the Bernie Sanders candidacy shifted her to the left when it comes to issues like free trade. She's instinctively a free trader. Globalization, she's instinctively more pro-globalization. And I wonder how much the Bernie Sanders candidacy has shifted her to the left.
Tim, I want to ask you about another issue. It's a domestic issue as well as a foreign policy issue, and that is, you know, these controversial comments that Donald Trump has made about Muslims. He was asked a question about that during the debate. You know, he told us initially, when he started this campaign to become president, that he would ban all Muslims from coming into this country. That somehow changed and morphed into, well, then it'll become extreme vetting. Let's take a listen to part of that debate.
The Muslim ban is something that, in some form, has morphed into extreme vetting from certain areas of the world. We are going to areas like Syria, where they're coming in by the tens of thousands because of Barack Obama, and Hillary Clinton wants to allow a 550% increase over Obama. People are coming into our country like we have no idea who they are, where they're from, what their feelings about our country is, and she wants 550% more. This is going to be the great Trojan horse of all time.
First of all, I will not let anyone into our country that I think poses a risk to us. But there are a lot of refugees, women and children, and we need to do our part.
Now, when it comes to implementing the policy that Donald Trump is talking about, I don't know how you do that. How do you determine who's Muslim at the airport, and how that happens? But has his campaign figured out that there's votes there are votes available if I adopt this anti-Muslim position?
Well, as a Republican and a Muslim, I was offended when I first heard it, because the question for me became, well, what happens if I leave the country? I have a United States passport. I'm American. I'm 4 or 5 generations American. But what happens if you look at my name and just automatically determine that I need to go into another line? In terms of what Trump has done and where that swath of the electorate, it seems as if they're not educated, or they don't even aren't aware of what we've been doing overseas, and where I would even go back to say our guilt in terms of how we have displaced millions of families. And so when we're talking about what's going on in Syria, this is something of a larger piece. It's a larger piece of the pie in terms of how we're looked at around the world also in terms of our relationships. When he says that this whole thing about calling this Islamic terrorism and to paint this whole brush against basically 1 billion Muslims around the world, what he's done, not just globally, but here at home, is alienated himself, alienated millions of people, other people that are here in this country. Now, the question is, under his presidency, How do you actually do that vetting piece? I don't know. I have no idea. I think that it's just another one of those pieces that's like a soundbite that he's using to try to have a resonating voice with other people. Once he gets into office, what happens when he starts to see the national security assessments? What happens when he starts to realize that this thing is a lot worse than he thought that it was? I often wonder what it's like for the president when they first get that first briefing as the president of the United States, and they realize this is not as easy as you thought. I mean, when we look at most of our presidents, why do they age so much? Because the issues are far greater than what it appears to and what we see on television.
Right. And you know, it's interesting. I think you have to look at his Muslim ban and what he said about Mexicans and what he said about all sorts of people in America as part of sort of a larger rhetorical fabric of how he's been appealing to his voters and his base. Basically, those folks out in the country believe that they built America. They were the ones who worked hard, and now America has forgotten them and is favoring everybody else. They're favoring minorities, they're favoring refugees, and he's trying to say, no, I'm going to put the focus back on you. This is a group that's been hit by a sense of status anxiety. They feel that they've lost status in society, they've lost their dominance in society, and as they're falling in status, they believe that liberals and elites and the government and the establishment has been conferring favors on everyone else. So that helps us understand the nativism in which people are pointing fingers at all these groups. And it could be Mexicans, it could be Muslims, it could be African Americans, it could be anybody. But the whole point is he's appealing to a group that feels that they have lost status and they are lashing out at others because they feel that those others have been the favored groups of the elites and the establishment.
And then he comes along, Afshin, and he makes these promises, for instance, like he's going to bring back manufacturing jobs to the United States. Right. Is that going to happen?
No, it's not going to happen. And to Leonard's point, that I always thought I can understand the frustration with the elites. I can understand the populism. I can understand that a populist candidate would appeal to those voters. I can understand that when 1 in 6 prime-aged white males are out of the workforce, and those other 5 out of 6 are struggling, to get by. The blue-collar workers I'm talking about, not the, the ones with higher education. I understand all of that. What I don't understand is how Donald Trump has become their standard bearer. That's the piece that is missing, the cognitive dissonance. So I think that, sometimes we, in Washington, we might dismiss them out of hand. Those people out in the middle of the country, they're hurting. There is real pain there. Their jobs have been dislocated. And guess what? There's more dislocation coming with robotics. There's more dislocation coming with advances in technology. And so that scream we're hearing, it could get louder.
But let's just say one thing. Mm-hmm. Minorities in this country have been hurting far more than most of the white working class for years. Sure. And nobody has gone out to appeal to their anger or their anxiety or their economic dislocation. And when they do say we need to be able to work in inner cities or help build up minority communities, they're often accused of catering to special interests. And this is where I find this dynamic very interesting.
Okay, let me get quickly to Hamoud in Los Angeles. Hamoud, we heard some commentators say after this debate, in fact during the campaigns as well, that whomever wins this election, the United States has changed. There was a reporter for the Pan-Arab newspaper, Al Hayat, who said, in both parties there's an exhaustion with the status quo, with the familiar faces. Donald Trump has capitalized on this wave of anger. We've been talking about that. So do you also think that even, no matter who wins this election, that it's not going to be business as usual after this?
Well, there is one theory where, and I think Afshin mentioned this, there is a pattern in American foreign policy that, you built on your predecessor, and there is a continuity of the same somehow with some variation. So there is that. But what changed is, I think what President Barack Obama brought to the front scene is allowing the regional partners, namely Saudi Arabia, Qatar, to play a role in foreign policy that is not necessarily that what has expected in the past. Okay. The involvement of the Saudis in Syria, in Yemen, in Bahrain, all these are indication that it is expected of these regional players to continue to play that role.
All right, thanks for that. Thanks to all of you for joining us. We've run out of time. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.